Welcome to Idlewild Cottage, a quiet place where kindred spirits can linger together over a cup of tea, savoring all things lovely and cozy. My name is Juliana, and I'm delighted to have you. Each episode here at the cottage will center around a theme. That theme will be celebrated in a number of ways, through literature, art, nature, and even some favorite movie scenes. We'll cherish the sweet and simple things of life. So make yourself at home, and I'll put the kettle on. Welcome back to Idlewild Cottage, where the daffodils are nodding, the earth is warming, and the winds are as fitful and fickle as ever. It is a joy to be with you, my friends, as we step into this new season. Early spring is a time in which the stage is set for many adventures and activities, from planning a garden to simply enjoying more time outdoors. Throughout our time together today, we'll enjoy literature, art, and a few movie scenes where spring is stepping into the spotlight, setting the stage for all sorts of possibilities. Take, for instance, our dear friend Mole, who literally steps into the light, the sunlight, in Kenneth Grahame's The Wind in the Willows. The mole had been working very hard all the morning, spring cleaning his little home. Spring was moving in the air above and in the earth below and around him, penetrating even his dark and lowly little house with its spirit of divine discontent and longing. It was small wonder then that he suddenly flung down his brush on the floor and bolted out of the house without even waiting to put on his coat. Something up above was calling him, and he made for the steep little tunnel. He scraped and scratched and scrabbled and scrooged, working busily with his little paws, till at last, pop, his snout came out into the sunlight, and he found himself rolling in the warm grass of a great meadow. Mole is not the only one who feels restless after a long winter. Our friend Heidi, after living on the mountain for some time now with her grandfather, knows the joys and promise that come with spring and is eager for its arrival. We can feel her pent-up energy in Chapter 5 of Johanna Spyri's delightful story. Heidi felt as happy and satisfied as the little birds of the air and rejoiced more and more every day for the coming spring days, when the warm south wind would blow through the fir trees and melt away the snow. Then the bright sun would appear, and the blue and yellow flowers, and the days for the pasture would come. When the March sun had melted away the snow on the slopes, and the snowdrops had come out in the valley, and the fir trees on the Alm had shaken the snow, Heidi began to run joyously back and forth from the house to the pen, then to the fir trees, and again back to the grandfather to tell him how large the green grass had grown under the trees. And immediately she ran back to see, for she could not wait for everything to grow green. While Heidi delights in the warm south winds, Mary Poppins fans will recall that the east winds mark the point of significant change for the Banks family. The opening scenes of this much-loved Julie Andrews classic find us at number 17 Cherry Tree Lane. The trees along the lane are laden with pink blossoms. All at once, the wind shifts, and a practically perfect nanny appears on the scene. She promises to stay until the wind changes, and in that span of time, many beautiful changes also take place in the lives of George, Winifred, Jane, and Michael Banks. The winds will now take us to Prince Edward Island, where we'll look at two scenes. The first mirrors Mary Poppins in that spring marks a moment of significant change. In the world of our dear Anne Shirley, spring means the beginning of her new life at Green Gables. If you've seen the 1985 movie Anne of Green Gables, the image of Anne and Matthew driving the buggy through the White Way of Delight, that is, the avenue of fragrant apple tree blossoms, is likely sweet and familiar to you. Let's flip the pages of time to Anne of Ingleside, where we now find Anne Shirley and Diana Barry as grown women. Now, in order to set the stage for their delight in the coming of spring, let's imagine ourselves gathering together at Idlewild Cottage. The fickle spring days have soared and dipped in temperature, but today is deliciously warm. So we'll take our tea and scones out to the wraparound porch. For, of course, Idlewild Cottage must have a porch. Swaying in the breeze are the fragrant boughs of the lilac bushes, which will also inspire today's art focus. It's quite fitting that we should admire a whimsical flower fairy painting by Cicely Mary Barker when lingering with fanciful Anne and Diana. I'll share a link to her sweet piece, The Lilac Fairy, in the show notes. And now back to Anne of Ingleside, where the girls give themselves up to a carefree holiday. We're going to be girls again tomorrow, Diana. That's what I've come to tell you. We're going to take an afternoon and evening off and visit all our old haunts. We'll walk over the spring fields and through those ferny old woods. We'll see all the old familiar things we loved and hills where we'll find our youth again. Nothing ever seems impossible in spring, you know. We pick up the next day as their girlhood memories are rekindled. Such a lovely day, made for us, said Diana. We'll drink in its beauty, said Anne. Look at those long golden green hills. Those mist-blue valleys, they're ours, Diana. There's a west wind blowing. I always feel adventurous when a west wind blows, and we're going to have a perfect ramble. They had. All the dear old spots were revisited. Lover's Lane, the Haunted Wood, Idlewild, Violet Vale, the Birch Path, Crystal Lake. Beauty was all around them. The spring sunshine sifted through the young green leaves. Gay trills of song were everywhere. At every turn, some fresh spring scent struck their faces. Spice ferns, fir balsam, the wholesome odor of newly plowed fields. Finally, after traversing a little wood glen full of toadstools, they ate their picnic supper, sitting on some old mossy stones with a lilac tree behind them, flinging purple banners against a low-hanging sun. Well, I maintain that no one writes of nature quite like our dear Lucy Maud Montgomery. Her reference to the scent of newly plowed fields brings us to another reality of springtime, one we read of in Farmer Boy by Laura Ingalls Wilder. The pace of life picks up, especially when there are acres and acres of fields to prepare. We feel inspired by the strong family work ethic woven from scenes of chapter 11. Now breakfast was eaten before dawn. There was no time to lose, no time to waste in rest or play. The life of the earth comes up with a rush in the springtime. All the wild seeds of weed and thistle, the sprouts of vine and bush and tree are trying to take the fields. Farmers must fight them with harrow and plow and hoe. They must plant the good seeds quickly. Almanzo was a little soldier in this great battle. Now that he was old enough to work in the fields, he could drive the old, gentle work team, Bess and Beauty. They were wise, sober mares. They were older than Almanzo, and he was going on 10. He hitched them to the harrow. Last fall the fields had been plowed. Now the lumpy soil must be harrowed. Bess and Beauty stepped out willingly. They liked to work in the springtime after the long winter of standing in their stalls. All over the countryside other boys were harrowing too, turning up the moist earth in the sunshine. Not all farmer boys are quite as diligent as Almanzo, however. For some, the allure of forest and stream is irresistible, especially when there is work to be done. Such is the life of Jody Baxter in The Yearling by Marjorie Rawlings. Jody stood a minute, balancing the hoe on his shoulder. The afternoon was alive with a soft stirring. It bored into him so that he must be gone across the clearing, through the pines and down the road. He stood his hoe against the split-rail fence. He walked down the cornfield until he was out of sight of the cabin. He swung himself over the fence, he cut into the sandy road, and began to run. It seemed to Jody that he could run forever. The April sky was framed by tawny sands and dense pines. It was as blue as his homespun shirt. Small clouds were stationary like bowls of cotton. The east bank of the road shelved suddenly. It dropped below him 20 feet into a spring. The bank was dense with magnolia, sweet gum, and gray-barked ash. He went down to the spring in the cool darkness of their shadows. A sharp pleasure came over him. This was a secret and a lovely place. For the March girls, spring is a gateway leading to endless delights, both out of doors and in, as we discover in Chapter 10 of Little Women. As spring came on, a new set of amusements became the fashion, and the lengthening of days gave long afternoons for work and play of all sorts. The garden had to be put in order, and each sister had a quarter of the little plot to do what she liked with. Gardening, walks, rows on the river, and flower hunts employed the fine days, and for rainy ones they had house diversions, some old, some new, all more or less original. One of these was the P.C., for, as secret societies were the fashion, it was thought proper to have one, and as all of the girls admired Dickens, they called themselves the Pickwick Club. As the girls grow, we see that love, too, blossoms in the spring. Toward the end of the book, we find a grown-up Amy in Switzerland, suddenly seeing childhood friend Laurie in a new light. The invigorating air did them both good, and much exercise worked wholesome changes in minds as well as bodies. They seemed to get clearer views of life and duty up there among the everlasting hills. The fresh winds blew away desponding doubts, delusive fancies, and moody mists. The warm spring sunshine brought out all sorts of aspiring ideas, tender hopes, and happy thoughts. The lake seemed to wash away the troubles of the past, and the grand old mountains to look down upon them, saying, "Little children, love one another." Spring marks the finale of their relationship, and we see this season in a similar light in two favorite musicals. Now, I've shared these movies before, but they pair so well with the theme it seemed a pity to ignore 7 Brides for 7 Brothers and Meet Me in St. Louis. Both films are driven by a seasonal timeline. In 7 Brides for 7 Brothers, spring means that the farm is again coming to life and love is in the air. Of course, everyone sings about this. And in Meet Me in St. Louis, a still photo frame literally tells us that it is now spring. The Smith family is dressed in their best, and as they climb into the carriage, little Tootie proudly gives the driver instructions. To the Louisiana Purchase Exposition. With this sense of joyful anticipation on our hearts, let's end with our closing scripture. This week, I'm going to stray just a bit from the Book of Psalms. We'll flip a few pages over to the Song of Songs, where a beautiful description of spring awaits. See, the winter is past. The rains are over and gone. Flowers appear on the earth. The season of singing has come. The cooing of doves is heard in our land. Spring is indeed a time when our senses are awakened to all things new. Friends, let's tune our hearts to the gift of this beauty in the coming weeks. Whether we hear birdsong, smell lilacs, or feel the wind in our face, would we recognize each as a gift to savor, a gift and a reminder that the season of singing has come, the the season of singing a new song to our Creator God. Thank you for joining me today, dear ones. Please come again soon to Idlewild Cottage.